So I have a stack of these square in a square blocks that I need to trim up to 5.5 by 5.5. And I thought I'd show you a couple little tips and tricks here. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is a square in a square. If there's another layer of a square after this that comes out like this, I believe that changes its name to an economy block. Put it in the comments. Tell me if I'm wrong. I'm not completely sure, but that's what I've always done. So I need these to be 5.5 by 5.5. I could very easily just stick it on here 5.5 and trim, but I wouldn't be able to make sure that this is exactly in the middle of the block, of all of the blocks that I have to cut. So what you do is you find the halfway point. So 5.5, halfway is 2 3/4. So I'm going to put these points on 2 3/4. I'm going to find here 2 3/4, put it there, 2 3/4, put it here. I just have to scoot it up. So it's 2 3/4 here, and then 2 3/4 here. So I'm going to make sure that they are all hitting that 2 3/4 mark. And then I can hold it down, cut this way, and then cut this way. And that should give you perfectly squared size here. Now when I turn it around, then I can do 5.5 by 5.5. So I'm just going to put this line along 5.5, this line along 5.5, and then I can trim this side and this side. I barely had anything over there and just a little bit there. So now these are going to be perfectly centered squares within a perfectly squared square, if that makes sense. Now, something else you want to pay attention to when you sew this to another block. So whether I'm sewing it to another square in a square, or I might be sewing it to a flying geese block right here, whatever you're sewing it to, make sure that you have sewn your block so that you have at least 1/4 inch right here. If you don't have 1/4 inch up above this point, when you sew this on there, you're going to cut that point off. So make sure that you're sewing it and trimming it in a way that you always have 1/4 inch up here. So for instance, if I was going to sew these two together and I lay it right sides together here, I won't be able to see where my point is, and if it's inside that 1/4 inch seam, I could end up cutting it off when I sew. So whenever you're sewing anything with the point, flip it over and then sew with this on the top, and you'll see your threads coming here on your seam, and then just sew just above that so that your needle just barely kisses the top of that little point where they meet. 1/4 inch seam, and that way you will for sure be able to keep your points when you open it up like that.